is Marvelle Wafford's persuasive speech. Here are my note cards I have today, and I have three guests. Um, I have my daughter Daisha, stepson Chase, and my fiance Keisha, which is she's piloting the camera. Okay, so imagine the taxes that are taken out of your check that are partially used to fund, um, that are partially used by the state of Nebraska to fund programs that help the less fortunate being wasted and thrown down the drain. Now also imagine that the majority of the needy individuals that use these programs take the money for granted and abuse what you have contributed. The United States welfare system originated back in the 1930s during the Great Depression, when more than 60% of all U.S. households were under the welfare system. This system was actually designed to help those in need get back on their feet, and those incapable of working, like the mentally deficient or the elderly, providing them with a sustainable income. The success of the program was also largely based upon people being willing to accept responsibility as well as accountability, and working diligently to get off of the assistance. Unfortunately, due to lack of accurate checks and balances in place to make sure the assistance ran effectively and efficiently, we now have an abused system. I'm going to convince you the problem that Nebraska's welfare program has currently. Then I will touch on the solution that welfare to work programs have that will solve in the state of Nebraska. Now, obviously, there is a big problem with the current conditions of the Nebraska welfare program. In particular, Nebraska has seen poverty levels steadily increase since 2005, as it shows in the provided chart. Now, as you can see on the actual chart, we showed that 2004 was roughly about a little bit over 10%. It went down to 2005 and 2006 to about 9.5%. It increased steadily up to 10% in 2007. 2008 was 11. 2009 and 2010 actually were 10 and 10 and a half respectively, and then it increased drastically 13% in the year 2011. And this is obviously based off of the U.S. Census Bureau from 2012. Now, according to the Nebraska State Auditors, more than $61,000 in questionable expenses out of a total of $79,251 in supportive payments show DHHS failed to follow their rules and regulations and properly monitored contractors in 20 test cases. Also, auditors discovered a lack of monitoring of programs of the DHHS contractors, timely eligibility reviews, and also claimed that that even after the department was notified, it failed to follow up on the alleged claims. The Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services has not effectively negated welfare abuse by recipients, nor have they allocated proper resources as well as economical resources as well as financial incentives to help with the transition of being weaned off of help from the state. In addition to losing cash benefits, families incurred extra expenses such as transportation, car maintenance expenses, daycare, as well as health expenses that would have otherwise been covered had they still been on assistance through the state. Individuals also fear that being off of assistance will have a greater financial burden or impact on them because their lives would obviously incur those particular charges that I aforementioned, and it ultimately causes them to have a hesitancy of being more self-sufficient. Now that I have identified some of the problems associated with the state of our current program, I'd like to touch on the solution that the welfare to work programs provide. If we implement welfare to work programs in Nebraska, we give the recipients more of a incentive to work that is more appealing than the cash benefits they already receive. Now, by conditioning incentive programs like the MFIP, which is, and then also the New Hope Project, which were based out of Minnesota, as well as the SSP, which is based out of Canada, employment and earning gains were the largest found among long-term welfare recipients that were evaluated by previous welfare to work programs. Also, the welfare to work programs in Oregon made participants feel self-effectuous, even if they didn't improve chances of being self-sufficient. They felt they were getting at minimum personal and social benefits, which gave them a sense of feeling a self-empowerment, which they would not have gained otherwise. Now, we can also streamline the transitional period of going from welfare to working by lessening the financial burden of added expenses like daycare and transportation, gas, etc., needed by providing them with some form of grant or a federally funded subsidy. Now, the other thing we can do that's pretty important is we can give them more skill and vocational training with drug testing. Educational institutions that specialize in training and educating these recipients need to be eradicated to help people get back into the swing of things in today's workforce. Another key thing we need to do is have drug testing. It would weed out participants that willingly are not motivated into bettering themselves, and it would also save money from the state being used on negligent individuals that are still using the system. As the state of Florida shows evidence that drug testing has the potential to drastically reduce unnecessary misuse of funds and welfare spending. And then the other thing we need to do is provide more of an incentive for recipients to maintain work. And we can do this by providing them at the end of the year with some type of tax credit. Say if they work a minimum of 35 hours a week, they would be eligible for like an earned income tax credit. So now that with that being said, in closing, we see that welfare to work programs can work. It benefits not only the state and taxpayers, but the actual individual recipient. As the saying goes, you can kill two birds with one stone by giving these recipients the skills they need to be productive in our society, and it saves our state, not to mention you, the taxpayer, money. Welfare to work programs revamp a system that is already in a poor state. Now, I'm going to just touch on something real key here before I go. According to the National Research Council and the Institute of Medicine, poverty is a very critical risk factor for mental, emotional, and behavior disorders for our children and youth. So what I mean by that is by implementing welfare to work programs in Nebraska, it is vital to the longevity of a bright future, and it ultimately affects our children. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.